All right, well, welcome back to Business 101 online with Professor Joe Lane. I've said in some of the other videos, a little bit different way of delivery for me. I'm sure a little bit of different way of delivery for you. But we just got through a heavy chapter, and that was chapter 17. There's a lot of stuff in chapter 17 that's kind of new to us. Balance sheet, income statement, that sort of thing. Okay, now we're going to go into chapter 18, which is the chapter on financial management. It's still some things we have to learn, maybe some things we hadn't heard of quite as much as others, but I think will be a little easier for us than chapter 17. As a matter of fact, I brought my stool in, so I think I can. That chapter on accounting, that's a pretty heavy chapter. I didn't feel like I could do much sitting down, but with this chapter, I may be in the camera now or out, but probably better if I was out. But let's talk about chapter 18, financial management. Okay, we know that businesses receive revenue. They use that revenue to operate that business. A good-sized business will receive millions of dollars in revenue. And of course, we know businesses have expenses. Is it really, really, really important that revenue be used in the very best way to help make that business successful, profitable? Well, I think the answer to that is, well, yes. Sometimes businesses may need to acquire more money. Maybe it's close to Christmas time and they want to stock up on some extra inventory to put on the shelves. So they may need to get some money, acquire some money to be able to buy that extra inventory. Maybe they need to acquire sometimes a lot of extra money. They're going to be able to buy a brand new expensive piece of equipment, or build an entirely different building or plant, or maybe acquire another business. Look at CenturyLink, how they've become so much larger just over the last number of years, and they have bought other companies. Excuse me. Do you think they had to acquire probably a good bit of financing to be able to do that? Well, the answer to all of those questions is yes. So should somebody be looking out for the finances of a company, making sure that revenue is utilized in the very best possible way? Yes. Okay, so that's the world, let me look here, that's the world of financial management. Finance, if you're talking about finance, it's the function in a business that acquires funds if they're needed and manages the funds of that business. You've heard the term chief financial officer. Usually that's a person that's right up at the very top, right below the president is going to be, or the CEO is going to be the CFO, the chief financial officer, because that person who is dealing with the finances of that company, very, very, very important. So that's what finance is, a function of a business that acquires funds and manages them. Financial management is the job of managing a firm's resources so that it meets its goals and obligations. Profitability is always a major goal. So these two, finance and financial management, finance is the function, performing that function of doing this is financial management. You say, well, now, is this accounting? No. Accounting is the classifying, recording, summarizing. Accounting tells you where you are. It records everything. But financial management and finance is looking forward and saying, here's how we're going to utilize those funds. Now let me ask you this question though. If you were a chief financial officer, if you were someone dealing with the financial operation of a company, would you get to know those accounting folks very well? Absolutely. Would you probably be good friends with the director of accounting? I know I would. Because accounting gives financial managers a lot of the information they need to be able to make good decisions about the finances of their company. Okay, so that kind of starts off at the very first of your study guide. We define finance and financial management, and I said that accounting and finance go together kind of like peanut butter and jelly. They work together, they have to. If you start a new business, chances are it's going to fail. Well, that wasn't very nice. But statistically speaking, after 5 years, the majority of businesses that have started are no longer in operation. The failure rate is over 50%. Okay, so why is it that businesses fail? Well, sometimes it's because they have a crummy product. Or maybe somebody opens up a restaurant and they want to be the chef and they don't know how to cook. Those could be problems. But most of the time, it's not the chef, it's not the product, it's the financial part of the business. Most doctors, most lawyers do not handle their finances on a day-to-day basis. They have professional financial managers that handle those sort of things. They're really, really good at being a doctor. They're really, really good at running a restaurant. They're really, really good at running an auto repair place. But they need someone to help them with the financial side of it. And of course, again, that's what financial management is all about. So most of the time, when companies fail, they fail because of financial reasons, not because they weren't producing a good or a good service. There are, and oh, by the way, I do want you to be familiar with finance and financial management, but I want you to know the 3 main ways that businesses fail financially. Okay. Financial failure is the number 1 reason that businesses fail. So let's find the 3 major reasons financially that businesses fail. I did a pretty good job of listing that on the handout. So let's look at those 3 most common ways that firms fail financially. Number 1, undercapitalization. Any idea what that means? It takes money to get started and to operate a business. If you open up your business, are you going to have customers standing out the door in line waiting to come in and spend money? Well, if you do, that's great. But a lot of times it takes a while for a business to get established, although you already have expenses. Plus you have lots and lots of expenses to get ready. I usually tell people, hey look, I'm getting ready to start a new business, Professor Lane. Okay. Have you determined all the amounts of money you're going to need, what you're going to need financially to get that business off the ground? Yes, sir. And maybe to operate for a couple of months. Yes, sir. How much is that going to be? It's going to be $60,000. What do you think, Professor Lane? 90? 90? Where'd you get that from? I pretty much can take what you think after you figured you know everything that it's going to cost. I take that number, I divide it in 2 and add half back again. So if you say 60 divided by 2 is 30, I add 30 back in 90. Because there's always things we don't think about. There's always things that come along that are unexpected. Okay, number 2, poor control over cash flow. We talked a little bit about cash flow last time. I've gotten so still I lost some of my lighting. All right, I want to get that still and might go to sleep. We talked a little bit about cash flow. You can have a successful business. I mean, you can be making a profit, but you can be putting so much money into buildings and so much money into equipment and things like that you can't pay your bills. And you can actually go belly up even though you were being profitable. So you've got to pay attention to your cash flow. So number 2, poor control over cash flow. And number 3, inadequate expense control, not watching your expenses. Business owners need to watch their expenses, and the successful ones, they do. So I would know the 3 most common ways that firms fail financially. All right. Let me throw up here, as we talk about financial management, one of the things that financial managers do, CFOs, they do financial planning. Now, if you look at your study guide, I put in your study guide or on your study guide financial planning because you want to you're trying to use the resources that you have, the finances you have, in the very best possible way to meet your company's goals and objectives. Okay, so in financial planning, there's 3 things that financial managers do as it relates to financial planning. And I listed them there. I didn't list the whole sentence. So I'm going to give that to you if you happen to look at your notes. One of the things that financial managers do, they do forecasting. They forecast financial needs. This may be a good time to say this. Accounting looks into the past. When you do a balance sheet, you do an income statement, should that balance sheet and income statement be accurate? Absolutely. Why? Because you're looking at stuff that's already happened. Most of the time when you're doing financial management, you're looking into the future, what's going to happen. You are managing to meet goals and objectives in the future. Okay. Is it helpful to have that accounting? We've already said. But the difference is accounting looks backwards. Financial forecasting, financial planning looks forward. Okay, the second thing in financial planning, you forecast financial needs. The second thing you do is you develop a budget or budgets. And the third thing you do is you establish financial controls. Let me talk a little bit. I'm gonna show you on your study guide. I defined budget for you. If you look at your notes, probably not a bad idea to print those notes off. A budget is a financial plan that set forth management expectations of their revenue. So a budget looks first at revenue. What revenue am I going to have? Right. Sets forth management's expectations of revenue, and on that basis, based upon their forecasting of what revenue they're going to have, allocates the use of specific resources. All right. Then they determine their expenses. Now, one of the things, I don't get too deep on you, and we don't need to, but that's one of the places that accounting really helps. Accounting, you can go over and look at, say, the income statement, and you can see certain expenses that you have. If you're paying for a building, if you're paying for equipment, you know that those are expenses that you're going to have in the following year as well. So what budgeting does, you develop a budget. What a budget does, you budget your revenue, you budget your expenses in such a way that you can accomplish your company's goals and objectives. An example would be, if you had a personal budget. Okay, here's how much money I'm going to receive. Here's how much income, we'll call it for you income, not revenue. Based upon this, I have certain expenses. Well, here's the expenses that I have to pay for my car insurance, my car note, my rent that I pay, for food, for this sort of thing. But I also want to take a nice vacation next year to the Bahamas. So you're going to budget some money you're going to set aside some money there so you'll be able to take that trip to the Bahamas. See, that's a goal or objective that you have. The same thing here. Businesses, determining based upon the revenue they have, then they utilize that revenue, they expend that revenue in such a way to be able to accomplish their goals and objectives. Now, establish financial controls. Budgets are great. I have just put together a great budget. But if you don't use that budget, if the company doesn't follow that budget, if the company doesn't put that budget into their accounting system to make sure that they are following the budget the way they're supposed to, it's not going to do them any good. When you take that budget and you implement it into the financial and the accounting system of your company, so you can see how you're doing with each of these budgeting items, that's control. All right. Okay, a little bit probably too much carried away with that, but that's financial planning. I would like for you to be familiar with what a budget is. I'd love to do a whole semester on budgeting. I love budgeting, but just suffice it to say right here that a part of financial planning, a part of what these folks do is budgeting. A budget is a financial plan that sets forth management's expectations of revenue, what they think they're going to receive, and based upon that expectation, allots the use of specific resources. It permits them to expend that money in a certain way to accomplish their goals and objectives. All right. I think I'll get back on my chair and talk about a couple of things. Do businesses need operating funds? Well, sure. Just now, think of yourself as a small business owner. Oh, you've got about 15 or 20 employees. You've got a pretty nice sized business. You're doing pretty well with that business. Do businesses need operating funds? Do they need funds to operate? Well, the answer is, well, of course. We just talked about that. You got to have funds to take care of the expenses and to meet goals and objectives and stuff. All right. What are some needs for operating funds? Why do businesses need operating funds? I've laid it out for you pretty nicely in your handout here. Let's go over it real quickly. Managing the day-to-day needs of the business. Taking care of those day-to-day needs, which you should have budgeted as a part of your expenses. Your advertising needs, your rent or your payment for your building needs, your utility needs, your insurance, whatever. But you have to manage, one of the needs you have for operating funds is to manage the day-to-day operations of your business. The second one is controlling credit operations. Now that sounds weird. But just think about it very simply like this. If you sell on credit, and most companies do, why do they sell on credit? Because their competitors do. And if I didn't sell on credit, they'd go to the competitor instead of me. So let's say that you sell a big TV set, one of those big, nice, new things for $2,000, and you sell it on credit, 12 months to pay. Yeah. All right. You've sold it. Is that good? Yes. Do you have your money? No. Are you going to get your money later? But do you need money right now to be able to replace that TV set so that other people that come in can buy it as well? In other words, what we're saying here is that when you sell on credit, inventory goes out the door. You're selling product, and that's great, but you don't have the money readily available to replace it from them paying you for it. So you have to make sure you have revenue from other sources to be able to replenish your inventory, if that makes sense. Number 3, acquiring needed inventory. Well, that kind of almost says, right, this might be a situation we just talked about, or I go back to Christmas time, or I go back to a particular point of the year with maybe it's big sales times for your company. Do you want to stock those shelves? If you ever gone into these Walmarts and places like this, say middle of November, man, they got everything stocked. They got Christmas stuff. They got all kind of stuff. They've got lots and lots and lots of inventory out there for you to buy. Might they have to make sure they have funds available to acquire that additional inventory? Yes. Making capital expenditures. Now, these are the big things. This is where you may have to buy, you're wanting to buy an expensive new piece of equipment. You're going to build a new building. You're going to do something. You may be going to buy a $20,000 piece of equipment. Or you may be getting ready to acquire a $50 million new manufacturing plant. So that acquiring capital expenditures. I just want you to be familiar with those. Why do businesses need, and of course it depends on the type of business and how large or how small, but why do businesses need operating funds? To manage day-to-day operations, to control credit operations, to acquire needed inventory, making capital expenditures. I'd be familiar with that. Okay. Let me, matter of fact, I think if you don't have this, you've got 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gone. If you didn't get that and you need it, text me and I'll send it to you for $10. I think you probably have it. Sometimes businesses need financing. They need additional funds. Okay. Why? To accomplish their goals and objectives. Let me go back to somebody I mentioned a minute ago. Do you think CenturyLink has borrowed some money lately? The answer is, you betcha. They have spent billions of dollars acquiring other firms. They've gone from a nice size regional company to a humongous worldwide company. Do you think that they needed additional funds to do that? The answer would be, oh yeah, big time. So businesses sometimes need additional funds for things like maybe something small like acquiring needed inventory for the Christmas season. Then right after the Christmas season's over, you can pay that back. Or it may be something like acquiring a new building or something which may take long-term financing. So is it okay for companies to borrow money? Yeah, for the right reasons. It's just like you. Is it okay for you to borrow money to buy a new car? Sure. To buy a new house? Sure. If you're having to borrow money to buy groceries and to pay your utilities, are you in trouble? You're in trouble. And if something doesn't happen, like a job or something like that, sooner or later you're going to be in serious trouble. Well, same thing with a business. If a business is acquiring funds to make payroll, unless it's a very strange situation, kind of like we're living in today with the coronavirus, if it's not, if it's just normal times and they're acquiring money to make payroll, here's what's getting ready to happen. Sooner or later, they're going to go belly up. All right. But there are a lot of times businesses need to acquire funds for legitimate reasons. Okay, so let's look at this. Where can you get I need money for inventory, I need money for some day-to-day operation things we're doing. I need some short-term financing. A year or less. Short-term financing. Where could I get short-term financing? I laid that out for you in your handout. And I'm looking at it. I'll just kind of go down through these really quickly. Trade credit. You can get short-term financing. Let's say this. If you're an established business and you buy $1,000 worth of something from a company, that company is probably not going to make you pay them $1,000 right then. They're probably going to give you a bill for it, and you have maybe up to 30 days to pay for it. That's really short-term financing. You've got $1,000 worth of something that you don't have to pay for 30 days. So that's one way. Family and friends, short-term financing. Can you do it? Yes. Do you see some problems there? Yes. If you're going to borrow money from family and friends, it should be done so that everybody understands I'm borrowing it, I expect it to pay back, that sort of thing. Commercial banks, you can just go to the bank and borrow money, just like anyone else. Factoring, accounts receivable. Okay. If we were in class, and I am, by the way, as I've told you, I am in 363. We've kind of pushed tables and everything back to set up the studio here. But it's almost like I could look out and see you. Now again, what you can't see is, I've got my book over here, and I've got stuff, and I've got my coffee sitting over here, and I've got a snack or two sitting over here, and I've got everything ready so I can get ready to prepare chapter number 19 once we finish chapter number 18. As I mentioned in chapter 17, I have the hairdresser back there, and the folks to do the makeup and everything, because it gets to running a little bit maybe after chapter 18, so they'll touch me up before chapter 19. Okay, I think I lost my train of thought. No, not really. Factoring. If you sell something to somebody on credit, they buy some furniture from you. And it's one of those things where they have a certain amount of time to pay. 12 months, no interest, that sort of thing. So when they buy that furniture and it walks out the door, remember we talked about we had to replenish that inventory. Okay, and they sign this piece of paper saying we're going to pay for this according to the terms of the agreement. Is that a legal piece of paper? Yeah, it's a legal document. So is this document worth anything? Well, yeah. I just signed this, Joe Lane, $2,000 because of what I bought and everything. It shows I have an obligation to pay it. I have to pay it by a certain time. I didn't have to pay it now. I have up to 12 months, no interest. All that's in here, and I've signed and sealed it and everything. So is this legal? It's legal. Is it worth something? Yeah. Because this says Whoever's got this piece of paper, Joe Lane's going to pay them $1,000 or $2,000, whatever the amount was. Could I sell this? Could I take this piece of paper and sell this to somebody else? Hey, I got a piece of paper here where Joe Lane's going to promise me $2,000. Could I go to a finance company myself as a business owner, a financing company, and say, hey, would you like to buy this? This is accounts receivable is what it's called. It's something I'm going to receive in the future, but I'd love to have my money right now. So I can sell this to somebody else if they're willing to buy it, these financing companies. Now, are they going to give me $2,000 for it? Nope, because they need to make a profit. And they also say, Joe Lane, he's a little shady, I'm going to have to take him to court. I'll give you $1,825 for this. Okay, so I might sell this to this financing company and get my $1,825 now instead of waiting a year to get $2,000. If I need that money and I feel like I can make money with that $1,825, I can make more than what I lose from selling it at less than $2,000, I'm going to do it. Most companies that you'll find, if you go down to an Ivan Smith or somewhere like this and you buy $5,000 worth of furniture and you sign one of these agreements, within 2 or 3 weeks there'll be something from a finance company, Tower Loan or someone like that, saying whenever it comes time for you to make your payments and stuff according to this contract, make them to us. What does that mean? That means that Ivan Smith sold that paper to Tower Loan. That's factoring. That's factoring. Commercial paper is just a specialized type of borrowing money from the bank. And then credit cards. Can you use your credit card for credit, for short-term credit? Yep. Is that a good idea? Okay. Let's talk about credit cards. Interest rates pretty high? Yes. So what you don't want to do, if you can put something on your credit card for a short period of time and then pay it off, that's good. But if you can't, you probably don't want to use credit cards for short-term financing because the interest rates on credit cards are a whole lot more than it would be on something like getting it from a commercial bank, someone like that. Or anyway, I'd like for you to just be familiar with some of the ways that you can get short-term financing. All right, let's talk about. I didn't put much up there on the board for that. Let's talk about long-term financing. Let's talk about financing for some big items. You're getting ready to build another plant somewhere, and you need $50 million. You say, wow, that's a lot of money. But if this new plant is going to help you expand and grow and become more profitable, you want to do that. So let's look a little bit at obtaining long-term financing. There's 2 ways that you can obtain long-term financing. There's debt financing and there is, I think we'll go green, equity financing. Now remember, this is long-term financing is much greater, much longer than a year. This could be 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. You can get long-term financing 2 ways. You can do it by debt financing or equity financing. Okay, you can see already that the key words here that we're looking at are these 2 right here, debt and equity. The first one is easy. If you go into debt, you buy a vehicle, so you have acquired some debt, what do you got to do? You got to pay it back. You got to pay it back with what? With interest. That's debt financing. So I'll put on your handout, I put on the handout here for you, debt financing. Now you can do debt financing 2 ways. You can do debt financing by issuing bonds. or you can do debt financing by going to a lending institution, like a bank. Okay, now let's just stay with me. So when it comes to debt financing, there's two ways. Debt financing means I'm going to borrow some money from somebody, but I got to do what? It's a debt. I owe it, so I got to pay it back. That's debt financing. So I can do that through selling of bonds. By the way, that's chapter 19, or part of chapter 19. Or I can go to a lending institution and simply borrow the money, just like you would to buy a car. There are some lending institutions that will lend a lot of money to the company if they qualify for that type of loan, so to speak. Equity financing. Remember owner's equity when we talked about it in accounting? When you do equity financing, you are selling ownership. You're selling ownership in the company. Primarily. There's one or two other ways you can do it, but this is the major way by far. You're selling. How do you sell ownership in a company? How does somebody buy ownership in a company? Stockholders? You've heard that term, stockholders? Okay. If you go out and buy some shares of stock in CenturyLink, go out today, CenturyLink's selling for about $9 a share. Go out and buy 1,000 shares of CenturyLink, it's going to cost you $9,000. All right. So CenturyLink gets what? They get $9,000. Good for them. What do you get? You get ownership in the company. You have just bought ownership into that company. So that's what equity financing is. Now, if you look at your handout, debt financing, talked about that. Issuing bonds are from a lending institution. Equity financing primarily by selling stock. Now, there's two others here that I'll just mention quickly. Retained earnings. Let's say your company has a lot of money in the bank. You've been very profitable. The company's put a lot of money in the bank, and you simply take the money out of the bank and pay for this whatever you need to do. Wow, it'd be pretty nice if you could do that. That would be called equity financing from retained earnings. You are taking that out of earnings which has been retained by the company. Okay, and then the third one is venture capitalist. This is where these are people that will go out for a portion of the ownership of the company and will lend money. So I'm Joe Lane, I'm filthy rich. A company needs $50 million. I say, okay, I'll bankroll that for a certain ownership in the company. Now, I will tell you this, venture capitalists don't usually do $50 million things. Venture capitalists do smaller type businesses. Let's say I was getting ready to start a business here in Monroe, West Monroe, and I needed some money to get started, or I needed some money to expand my business. I could go to probably some people here in this area that for a portion of the ownership of that company would lend me some money to do the things I need to do. It's still, though, a part of the ownership. Okay, so that's kind of where we are. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to be familiar with the ways you can obtain short-term financing, and I also want you to be familiar with the ways that you can obtain long-term financing. You can do it through debt financing, or you can do it through equity financing. You can do it through the selling of bonds, and you can do it through a commercial bank, a lending institution. When you sell ownership, we talked about that. That's stock. That's also chapter 9. So that we're going to it's almost like a continuation of chapter 18 when we do chapter 19. But in equity financing, primarily you do it by selling stock. You can use money from your retained earnings, or in smaller businesses that are needing money, there are venture capitalists, people that have funds that are willing to invest in your company for a portion of the ownership. I think that takes care of chapter 18 for us. We are in a couple of chapters talking about financial management, how important it is to handle the finances of your company in the proper way. Is it okay to borrow? Yes, for the right things. But how am I going to borrow? Well, how am I going to borrow? Am I going to sell stock? Am I going to borrow from a lending institution? If it's short-term borrowing, am I going to do factoring? Am I going to borrow from family and friends? Am I going to use the credit card? Am I going to go to a commercial bank? These are all things that in financial management you determine the best way to do it to accomplish your firm's goals and objectives. Long-term financing, do I want to do debt? Do I want to do equity? Makes a huge difference, because debt and equity financing, which way you do it, certainly affects your balance sheet a lot. And so financial managers, chief financial officers, they're the ones that make sure that these are all done in the right way. Okay, I think that takes care of chapter 18. We are going to take a little break. We are going to come back and we are going to knock out chapter 19. So thank you for being online with Professor Joe Lane. As I mentioned to you before, Professor Pierce needs a loud noise. So if y'all will all shout when I clap my hand, it'll be the loud noise, and we'll know that we have done chapter 18. Thank you. See you soon.